Good evening. Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Yes? Everybody hears me?
Yes.
All right. I will hopefully remember to keep this close to my mouth and so you can continue to hear me. My name is Susan Snider Salmon, and I am a member of the Historic Preservation Board in Monroe County. You'll know where that is because it's just up the pike a bit, kind of north of here. About 5 years ago, one of my college professors said, Susan, I'm not going to be around much longer, and somebody needs to pick up the work on our dry stack stone walls. Well, that's all she had to say. And from Cheryl Munson's blessing, you're about to hear some of the research that has gone into the work in the last 5 years or so. I did meet Rowena 2 years ago in Bloomington at a limestone festival, and we were talking, and she said, oh, come down and talk with us and tell us about the walls in Monroe County. Now there's a handout in the back, not a handout, but a kiosk there that tells you a little bit about the walls. And I want you all to have a chance to look at the map on the right, which is from the geology department at IU. It has all of the layers of the limestone at surface level throughout Monroe County. Now the same kind of map, oddly enough, exists for Lawrence County, and it also is on the same website. So if you need reference to that, I'm sure we can do a follow-up email with some citations if that's something you all want. So as I started to put together what we wanted to talk about, I realized, my husband has family down there in Bedford. I think they want to know what the Bedford walls, most importantly. And then we'll pepper that a little bit with the Monroe County walls. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to talk a little bit about Bedford, add in a little bit about Monroe County, and then open up for questions. If you know of a wall that I don't talk about, or I talk with someone over here who says, I have one in my backyard, please make a note and give me your contact information so I can check it out and figure out what it is and figure out where in the taxonomy of the walls that falls. Also, I'm going to pass around some pictures of some of the more prominent dry stack stone walls in Monroe County, so feel free to just pass these around as I'm talking. I'm attached, I can't go too far. And the sort of best book on what exists in Kentucky is this piece, which I'm going to pass around as well if you want to peek through it. You may see that I've borrowed liberally from some of the references in here, and I have talked with the author and some folks. Kentucky, by the way, I can pass that around too. Kentucky has a state ordinance protecting these walls. We're lucky to have somebody care enough to try to save the one in their backyard. But neither Lawrence nor Monroe has an existing ordinance that prohibits taking down of the walls. So before I get started, any questions? Okay, good. So dry stack stone walls. If you see anything that's familiar, I would not be surprised. The difference between what is a dry stack stone wall and a stone wall and a stone row and a stone fence, really what it comes down to is who's defining it and where it is. Bottom line is dry stack means not used with mortar. So the rocks are relying on the physics and friction to hold them in place. When you apply mortar, in my humble opinion, you get a sense of permanence that comes from good, a mix of concrete. And unfortunately, that also traps the moisture, which leads to freeze and thaw, which ultimately degrades the fence. We have fences in the eastern part of Kentucky that are dry stack stone fences that are well over 200 years old and just as good as the day they were made. So one of the reasons that the stones work is because they're a particular kind of limestone. Now you have your own expert on limestone in the room. Everybody know Clay? Clay's Jackie, yeah. Is it Mr. I know everything about limestone. I keep reading his stuff and keep learning things. So if you don't know his work, make sure you look through that. So bottom line is I may mix our terms around and interchangeably because frankly, it just depends on where you are, who you're talking to, and what's going on. Alrighty. The stone wall things we have in common. I was just in New England and had to tell my sister, pull over, I want another picture. This happens to be at a friend's house, and it's an original wall. She has a 1630 farmhouse, and her husband's done a little work on it, but that's what it looked like originally. See how closely those rocks are together. That's being held with the physics and the friction. Those are just rocks that perpetually come up out of the ground when you're trying to farm. You've heard that story. Because of the glacial expanse that came through that deposited all of those fun little rocks that were tumbled around in the glacier, and now they just pop up when you're trying to farm. So to get them out of your way, you put them in a pile and then you make fences out of them. They're all over New England. They're very similar to the ones we see back in Scotland and Ireland, and in fact there's a World Heritage Site now in that area in Scotland and Ireland to put emphasis on the importance of the heritage of those walls. If you think about it, it's the same stone. I mean, it's the same mountains. The continents just separated. So if you look at a good map of how Pangaea split up, you can go, oh yeah, well the rock's right there. So we're going to talk about what the rock means. This is down in Kentucky and out in the middle of the woods. There's nothing around it, it's just out there. And it's not uncommon to be out hiking, out hunting, whatever, and just come across a wall. Because it used to be something. It used to be a farmstead. In Kentucky, one of the early things they did is they developed toll roads. One of the first roads when the stoneworkers from Maysville on the Ohio down to Lexington, they actually built a limestone corridor to get to the capital. And the first stoneworkers for the Commonwealth of Kentucky built that. And along both sides were dry stack stone walls. Many of them are still there, places like Mercer County and Scott County. You're just driving along and all of a sudden both sides of the road and everywhere you see dry stack stone walls. And I just have to stop my car and I pant. And my niece goes, what's wrong? She lives right there. She gets to see them every day and I'm going, oh my gosh, how do you deal with that? But in Kentucky, they built the toll roads, and there was actually, that kept people on the road, so they didn't get off into other people's property, but also gave them income. We're going to get you, it's kind of like you're on now, you get on a toll road, you can't get off without paying a toll. And the other thing we see in Kentucky is the original law, which I think is the next slide, so let me deal with it, yes. The folks in Kentucky that settled there found that to be really good grazing land. And they went back to England to get good broodstock. You've heard of wonderful horses, and well, they also liked pigs and cows. And they brought those over from England. And there was a trespass law that Kentucky passed very early on, and basically saying, don't let your heifer in with my heifer. So what they found is, yes, you could build walls of wood, but if you build the walls of that nuisance stone that's out there in your field, they're going to last a lot longer and you're going to keep the livestock separate. So initially, it's basically crowd control. And we see that all through the state of Kentucky in sort of a ring around Lexington, because there was a rise up of the stone, and the stone is right there to be utilized. And I'll get more into the stone in a minute. I love this picture because you see that what it might have looked like somewhat as a toll road. And you see that lovely car that's been around for a while. What they found is wood fences last about 10 years. And you have to go place them, and they aren't necessarily as sturdy. So what they found is the stone walls really satisfied a need and made a difference. the folks that built the walls here came from there. There's a direct line. We can track them all back. So not all the builders came from there, but the folks that settled came up. And from Virginia. There's a Clear Creek, which is the township, which is just north of the border here. Those folks came from a little bit further into Virginia. And to this day, I don't know why they moved. It's so beautiful there, but who knows? All right. So this is another picture in Kentucky. And some of the stone was just gathered because it was in the way, just like in New England. And some of the stone was cut from the creeks nearby. And like I said, the map back here, you'll be able to see and envision what that might look like in sort of a surface pattern. And some are quarried out of the landscape. But when you see these deep ravines, and you know, around here, you just drive from here to Ulitic, and you've got layers that you see. You're never gonna see those layers the same again after tonight, because you're going to start naming the layers. Oh my God, and you'll be able to actually point out which ones, and be the smartest person in the car. So dry stack stone walls were built without mortar. They were constructed where the stone was easy to obtain, or in cases, particularly in cemeteries. There was a movement that I've been able to date to post-Civil War, and more closely into the 1880s, there was a movement to put a fence around a cemetery, and some people chose to do it with these stones, particularly when they're right next door. Like Scoggins, which is just downstream from Otis Park, the rock is right there. I mean, it's 20 feet away from the cemetery. And they're frequently used to demarcate property lines. What we find is very, very early settlers were coming up from Kentucky and bringing that tradition with them. And you will see, we've been able to reconstruct in Monroe County what appears to be a very large area. The entire property line may have originally been covered with walls. There's been so much disturbance and so much development, it just fades away into nothing. But the remnants are there. So that's what I'm studying, is what's left and what does it mean, and superimposing that on the historic record and looking at the old maps and putting all that together. And it's just crazy. I go down one rabbit hole after the next. All right, quarrying and construction sometimes was done by contract. I have a copy, this is one of the best gifts I've ever had. I have a copy of a contract that was done in 1888 for a church in Monroe County, and it is a contract to build a wall, 3 walls around their cemetery. The 4th wall, they couldn't buy that land, so they didn't fence it in, they just kept it wooded. And I'll tell you about that cemetery later, but the fun part of it is, in the contract, it states the pretty side needs to be facing in, so that those who are interred within have the pretty side of the fence. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the measurement is, but somebody at the time must have had some sense of what that was. Remnant walls are they're found in places where you could expect that they might have been in the way, or that they might have been piled because they were in the way. So we see a lot of, if you go down past Otis Park, down Leatherwood Creek, down that way, you'll see remnant walls just hanging out there. If you've never gone down that way, just drive and look at it. They're just hanging out there. They're falling apart, but they're there, which tells me they've been there a very long time. We don't know how long yet. I'm still working on that. So physics and friction remain the key. We appear to have, in some cases, the massive walls that cover the entire property may have something to do with, prestige of the landowner. You have to have a lot of money to be able to put a little bit of money into paying somebody to build these walls. They don't happen overnight. A rod is about 8 feet, depending on where you are. And the going rate was $8.80 a rod. And it took a day, if you were lucky and had 2 people, to build a rod. So if you think of someone having 300 acres, and it took 10 years in one place in Monroe County to build the circumference walls. And we were able to actually place the builder on the property in the censuses. So framing out that 10-year period, which is really cool. Most of the farm-based dry stack stone wall construction, a lot of those were just obliterated when more farming took place. Some cemeteries were obliterated when that took place. But cemeteries in general, if the fences were already there before the farming got larger and more heavier equipment came in, we see those still in place. You've got at least 4 in Lawrence County that I've found. We'll talk about each one of them. And there may be more, but that's what I've found from looking at historic publicly available records. So that's why I need your help too. So if you know where these are, you gotta write me a note. And so cemeteries were not plowed over if they already had a wall around them because it was too much work. But a lot of times we see things that were just plowed over because they were in the way. All right, a little bit of geology. You know what this is, right? It's like out your back door. This is a picture of, I think that's actually, that may be the Blue Hole. I'm not sure. I think it's, or it's in Lydic, but it's one of them. I'm sure Clay can tell us how to get there. There's a wonderful cache of photographs from Indiana limestone through IU Library, and you can just get lost looking at those pictures. It's just fascinating. And this is one of those pictures. So basically, when you're dealing with the limestone, that's the Salem limestone, that is the building limestone that we talk about, the dimensional limestone. It basically is any way you want to go. It smooths out, you can carve it, you can go lateral, you can go upright, it's easily sawn. It's just a very workable resource. So that in particular is what that was discovered and started, the technologies came around to better utilize it. That's where we see the bulging limestone industry that catapulted our 2 counties into international fame. You may remember the athletic field at IU before they put in an arboretum, and that's a picture of the west-facing side. The band of Salem limestone begins, think of Gosport. Go all the way up to Gosport. It kind of starts there, and it sort of meanders down kind of southwesterly through Owen County to Monroe and Lawrence, and then just into Washington a bit. But this small area is 50 to 75% of the dimensional limestone used in the world. It's right at the surface, if you weren't aware of that. There are other places where it exists, of course, but you have to go digging for it. Here, it's just, hello, in your backyard. The outcrop begins up in Steinsville and goes through it. Turns out that it was very profitable because it was right there. And then the railroads came. And that's when we saw the huge expansion of workers and people and activity, and then the decline from there as building standards have changed. So this is another picture of the stadium. Now, back in geological time, if you go back to high school, it's been a minute, right? So we're in the Mississippian period here. Let's go back here. And down here, you've got the, make sure I'm seeing the right thing. Should be right about there. Okay, we've got the St. Louis here, which we're not going to be talking about. But we have, here is the Salem limestone. It's all a part of the Sanders group, part of the Mississippian age, which is a very long period of time. But look right down here where it says Harrodsburg. See that little line right there? That is the stone in our fences. It's not the Salem dimensional limestone. If you've got a fence of Salem dimensional limestone, it's not a dry stack stone wall. It can't be. We'll see why. Now this is a good example. You can see it all the way up there in Owen County. Here's Monroe. The line, the biggest line, this is the Mississippian group here, but the line for the access to the stone starts about here, pops down through Monroe, down through Lawrence, and pops a little bit into around Salem. Thus, Salem limestone, named after where it was first named, in Salem. I love the way that works out. So here you've got a close-up of that chart. You can see the Salem limestone, the Harrodsburg, and then there's the Ramp Creek, which signals, it stopped, we're past. You can't pick from here anymore. And oddly enough, this whole group, and Jill's not talking about geos and this kind of thing, but you have to listen to her talk about geos, because she's just talking about Mormons next time, right? Yeah. She'll talk a lot about these and where you can go pick things and find things. So if you're interested in that, just grab her next month and pick her brain on where you can get geos. That's all a part of the Sanders group. So that's important that you think, okay, that's what all these outcrops are around here. When you go to Bloomington and you pass by the road to the lake, you're seeing those layers right there. Now I'm not going to read through this. If you're interested, you can go through the whole thing. If you're interested, I can also send a copy of the slides down to the museum. These little critters here, the gastropods, the crinoids, everybody knows crinoids, so there's fun little things used to make it in necklaces because you'd walk along the creek, I remember that. And then you grab a geode and throw it at your friend. Remember the creek stopping days? Who did that? Let's see, confess, okay, roomful. And then my favorite is the bryozoans, because those are the ones that tell me if we really have the Harrodsburg limestone, the good old bryozoans. Looks like a sea fan, right? Yeah, that's kind of what it is. So the Salem limestone is Mississippian, it's fine-grained, it's recognized worldwide as a premier dimensional limestone. You know, when the Pentagon got hit after 9/11, they said, well, how do we replace our stone? And somebody said, well, I don't know, it's called Hunter Valley. So they came to Hunter Valley in Monroe County to the same quarry and got replacement stone, because that's where it came from. And it's sensible at ground level, the outcrop, and y'all know, because there's a whole lot here in Bedford, a lot more quarries, a lot more workers, a lot more mills. The band is a little smaller in Monroe County than it is down here. It's up to 10 miles wide down here and not that wide up in Monroe County. So what we see is a continuation of that stone, but access to it broadens out when we get down to Lawrence County, which is kind of a neat thing. And here's the deal. People grew up thinking, oh, we got Bedford stone. Oh, we got Monroe County stone, we got Bloomington stone. It's all the same stone. They didn't know that back then, but it's all the same stuff. So I tried to get as many. White River stone was new to me. If you have a name that I don't have up here, please give it to me and I'll adapt that. But it's all the same stuff. But some of us have naming rights. We've claimed it one way or the other. But I want you to kind of have that heritage in your mind, and now we're going to go deep down underneath that. So the Harrodsburg limestone is named in the late 1800s in Harrodsburg, of all things. Y'all know where Harrodsburg is? It's just across the county line on the far western side there. Some of the first settlers there were Ketchums, if you've ever heard of them. Lots of fences were built in that area. And look really closely. What do you see?
Checksmith. Yeah.
You see that? Isn't that wild? And guess what? In the back of the room, I have rock samples from all of the fences in Monroe County, and you could see it in person. If you need a magnifying glass, I don't have one, but this is what I call it. I just call it Chex Mix. If you see Chex Mix, it's Harrodsburg. Now, this is my friend Polly, and she is showing, this is actually in Bloomington at Cascades Park. It's showing the dimensional limestone here. And underneath that is crumbling is the Harrodsburg line. There's actually 7 layers of stone right there. 7 layers of stone right there in that outcrop in Cascades Park. It's kind of hard to see anytime except in the dead of winter. So if you're a real rockhead and you're interested, that's a really cool place to go. It's just on the way up from down at the lower level to the upper level, going to the golf course. So it's right there, you can't miss it, but go in the winter because otherwise you can't see it. So Harrodsburg limestone, again, these are the nerds in the room. You can read all the details. What I find interesting is that it can go anywhere from 20 to hundreds of feet thick, depending on where you are. And then just recently I was able to connect with some scientist friends of mine at U Kentucky, and they were able to guarantee to me that the Warsaw Shale in Kentucky, where all those Kentucky walls are, is the same stuff. We're talking about the same layer stuff, but it's just called something different because it's in Kentucky. What do you say? So what I'm saying is it's layered in plain sight. And we have all of these layers of stone right outside our back doors. And if you look at that map, you can see a very tiny dark gray that says different tiny little letters in it. And the more you look at the map back there and look for this tiny little line, or if you go to the Lawrence County map, which I'll show you later, and do the same thing, it's almost always in a creek bed at the bottom of a ravine, a long slope. Wonder why that is. Erosion sort of gave it to us. You know, they cut through the dimensional limestone, which we know is porous because of karst and caves. It goes right through. It's that layer below, which is much more stable. Got a little bit of clay, a little bit of shirt in it, but you can actually get to that next layer. So okay, what is this dry stack stone wall anyway? And I have to tell you, if you're interested, the best folks in the world are the Dry Stone Conservancy out of Kentucky. And those are the folks that go out and do a lot of repair work. And it is a not-for-profit. They are amazing. I'm trying to get them up here to do some workshops. So if you're really interested in the detail of this, you can come by and look at this book later. But this is the anatomy of the wall. They're called coping stones at the top. I didn't name that. I would have called it something entirely different. But they're that very common slanted stone that you see on top. Those are coping stones. Whether mortar was used or not, they're still coping stones. And then you've got your cover course, and this is a classic no mortar wall. You've got your upper section, a tie rod, which kind of helps bind everything together and gives it a little more friction, gives it a little more stability. Lower section, foundation. Foundations can be huge. I'll see a wall later that is believed to be 12 feet in diameter, not diameter, but across at the bottom. But it supports a huge, huge wall. So it's kind of like, think of a cemetery when you're putting up a headstone. The base needs to be twice the size of the headstone. That's kind of what we're talking about here, is the base to these walls needs to be big enough to support the weight of all of those stones. Now, oddly enough, there's an identical, look back and forth. You've got that design, it's bigger at the bottom, tapered to the top. And here you have an exact example. This is at Maple Grove, at a house at the Ben Owens Farmstead in Monroe County. So you see everything in place there. Question?
In there, what is that?
Oh, I didn't see. What did you sneak in?
I've been here the whole time.
I didn't see you. Well, now you can ask her about geos here.
What is the core? Is that just like a filler in there?
It's not, as I understand it, and as dry stone refers to it, it is carefully laid rubble
Okay.
to fill. Yeah, it is not just junk. It is just carefully, and everything is very carefully laid. Kind of, because they don't want any gaps in there. They want it to ease out. So I've seen them rebuild these, and I've seen them not use any of that at all. They just totally leave out that element. Some of the guys that come up to repair the walls now don't always do that. But this is the classic.
Do they shape the stones?
Yes.
A little bit so they fit better?
Some are more shaped than others. Some of the rock can be pretty heavy and pretty. I brought a friend with me, and last year she helped me with a couple presentations, and the rocks are this big. And so Sally's trying to lift this, and we're having three third graders try to lift this stone, and they're just like, the thing's bigger than me. So in the most part, it could flake out. If it's quarried, very often there would have been a heavy-duty quarrying going on to get a large supply. And we do see that north of Bloomington in the Maple Grove area and Stouts Creek, that there's a clear quarry there where several times it was gone, people went in to get stone. So you see it shaped, but not so that it is close. It is not a tight fit. Because you're grabbing on, think of we talked about the friction, you got all those cranides you're gonna grab onto. Yeah, so you want that to be rough and have a surface that it can patch onto. It's kind of like when you do your nails, you don't want it to be real smooth like that. So this is an actual, when I saw that I said, oh my gosh, it's just like the picture. How'd they do that? And that's a fun one. So why study the walls at all? I'm chicken time here. Anybody, why would you study walls? Or would you? Anybody want to guess?
You learn about the past.
It's history.
Yeah? Yeah?
It's history.
It is. And if you're here, that means you're into history, so I appreciate that. What I have found is there's just a total absence of discussion of the walls. And I've come to the conclusion that they were so ubiquitous, nobody talked about them, because it was like looking for a sidewalk. They were there. They were everywhere in those neighborhoods. And you didn't talk about them because they were there. So I'm going to be doing some additional research into deeds and taxes and trying to find out if I can get a little bit more. But the walls in our area are just like in New England. You got a wall in your backyard, so what? Everybody's got a wall in their backyard. But they don't have them in Ohio. So the fact that they're here and why they're here, who made them, when they made them, I think that's fascinating. So anyway, that's why I study them. Some of the inventories in my own county, in Monroe County, they recently did a total review of all the cemeteries. And half of the cemeteries listed in the book didn't even mention that they had a stone wall. And I went, what are you thinking? They're right there in the picture. You don't even mention it. So you can't word search because it's not there to find. And our databases that are put together for historic preservation aren't word searchable. And even if they were, you'll find stone misspelled S-T-E-O-N, and you won't find mention of the rock walls at all. And everybody used a different nomenclature for them. So it's a little nutty trying to do the historic research in our databases.
What's the height of the walls?
That's a good question. Heights of the wall are going to depend on where you are. The ones around here, original walls around here are a little shorter than you might find in Monroe County. The Owen County, the three clusters we're going to talk about, don't even have dimensions on those because I've not been in person. But in Monroe County, up at the Owens farm, those walls are taller than me. And they are humongous. Down at the base, they're 3-4 feet wide. And those are the ones those were built in the late 1860s. All right, so we'll see pictures, and there's some circulating around too. I should mention, does anybody know what shard is?
Jill does.
Shard. Anybody want to guess? Jill?
State historic archaeology, shoot records, something records that.
I think archaeology's in there somewhere, yeah. It's the database that the state had put together along with volunteers. And what you will hear sometimes is something called an interim report. I wasn't able to get the Lawrence County interim report online, so I may have to come down and get a copy of it. But that is where sometimes, if we're lucky, whoever did the naming of the properties listed the walls. But very often they're just absent, which makes me really angry. So anyway, cemetery descriptions also often just omit the names. So dry stack stone walls are unique and limited geographically. They represent a time in our history when agriculture was at the top. And once, there's a slide a little earlier that mentions, once barbed wire came along, I didn't see them built anymore, unless they were ornamentally done for cemeteries. There are cemeteries that were built after, and in this area, there was a lot built after, even after 1900. It just happened to be a lot of limestone around, a lot of stone workers, very talented carvers. My husband's family comes from that line, so on. You've got modern applications going on, sustainable processes. They do need to be repaired from time to time. When a car goes through it kind of messes it up. That happens. But sometimes when mortar is used in particular, the walls do fall down and they need repair. So we got all this going on, and I just want you to kind of be aware of what occasionally we see the wall names. This is a 1966. Oops, I got to get better at this. This is a 1966 little booklet. There was a lot of these done. They just exist. And different agencies did them. Some are national, some were state and local. But this publication is, as you can read along here, it says, turn left at the crossroads, go 1.2 miles, stops at the stop sign. You can't redo that. But I have figured out where this location is, and if you read it, the dry stone fence to the left of the road extends more than a mile to the east and to the south, and is a monument to bygone days, 79 years ago. Let's pick a nice round number. 79 years ago, a man and a boy hauled the stone from nearby quarries by horse, and probably mule, but maybe horse, and sled, and built 2 rods, I mentioned rods, 2 rods of fence per day at a construction cost of $250 per rod. Now, I don't know where that came from because it doesn't document it, but my documentation is it was a going price of $880 in 1888. So somewhere this information got in, but this is it in that entire booklet, the only dry stack stone wall that is mentioned. This is along Victor Pike, by the way. I was able to reconstruct it by using an old Dixie Highway maps and some other county maps, and oh yeah, I remember that. So I was able to kind of, if you ever want to drive yourself crazy, get this book and try to follow the directions. Because it goes through Lawrence County.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a great little monograph. You can still buy them on eBay. So many, I was telling Sally on the way down here, once you have this in your head, you can't unsee them. You start to see them everywhere. And you go, oh my gosh, there they are. Oh my gosh, there they are. So you see also dry stack properties used for retaining walls on streambacks in particular. We had some in Bloomington that got blown out recently in a flood. And they had to replace them. In road cuts, and railroad piers, embankments, and bridge piers. Some of those were dry stack. So the technology was used. I don't know what stone it is. I know it looks like limestone, but I don't know if it was Harrodsburg or not. So I'm not one of those to go hopping out in the woods to find that out. But when you see those out in the middle of the river, that could be dry stack, I don't know. There's some out in the middle of White River South here, right? So the most widely recognized walls and fences are those that border property lines and that were not plowed down by farmers, and where the stone was basically right there in your face or down in the holler, next to the house. Here's an example of a photograph that is focusing on this is the skidder. This cleared the road of snow. And do you see the wall now? Hello. You see the wall going back? All the way back here.
So what's that machine?
That is a skidder. It cleared snow. That's how they cleared snow. And this guy's job was to clear snow, and that's his daughter hanging out, all right? So there's a wall. It's not even talked about. It's not encoded anywhere. It's not inventoried anywhere. It's just there.
Where was that?
That is, where the Speedway is in Bloomington? Going down toward Fairfax? That is where the Speedway is now. Now here you have the home demonstration clubs of the 1940s up in Maple Grove. And I love this, it's just hilarious. What are they doing? They're all looking at the cemetery, right? You can see the wall if you look really carefully. What the heck were they doing? I don't know, gosh, getting better. Get with us, Susan. Here, there's the wall right there. Here's the wall right here. It's a gorgeous wall. They even took part of it out, the new church took part of it out and put it inside their sanctuary. They moved it inside, yeah. How cool is that? So, no mention of the wall, not in the index, but here are the ladies out there right in front of the wall, hiding in plain sight. So where are the remaining walls in Monroe County? This was where I started when Cheryl passed the torch to me. And then I added some additional questions, and that continues to expand. And then when Rowena and I talked, I said, okay, I got to learn about Lawrence County. A lot going on down there. So let's look at Lawrence County. Any guess where this is? That is Avoca, yes. Yeah, it's relatively new. Hello. There we go. Where have you seen any? Who's seen one? You think? All right, we're going to test that. We're going to test it. That's exactly right. I had the first thing I had to do was figure out, because I don't know the townships. So I had to figure out the Lawrence County Township. I'm familiar with Shawswick, and I'm familiar with Flynn. But other than that, I was pretty dumb. So I had to figure out where everything was. And I forgot to put the mic up. You should have yelled at me. Okay, so here you have a really good picture. So picture that in your mind as we go through the next few slides. Avoca, of course, is just as you're coming down 37. It was settled in that area in 1819. Hamer Brothers built the inn there in 1823. It's been a lot of things. The state put in, started building in 1919, and the fish hatchery was started in 1923. You may not know, because it's spring-fed. The reason Avoca kept going for so long is because it was cold water. And because my husband was director of fish, division of fisheries, I knew this because we used to come down here a lot. Trout was raised there. It's the only place they could do it in southern Indiana because it was cold water. Everything else was warm water fish. So it was really a specialized place for Avoca, and we loved that. It was a super, super location. And then in 2013 it closed, and then there was a fund development program, Marshall Township, and the township trustee moved in there. I just love that. And they've really developed and enhanced it, and it's a beautiful park. So here's the Hamer Inn of circa 1886. What do you notice?
Wooden fence.
I stole that from you guys. It was in one of your publications. But I said, yes, because that was 1886. And you know what? There's no stone wall. It's picket fence. So we know there was no picket fence in 1886. And then in doing more research and continuing to work is the CCC, the WPA, and the National Youth agency, one of them, whatever that is. They all did different things, but they all did similar things. And what I began to notice when I looked at the cluster of walls down here was a very specific style of construction that my mentor Cheryl had not mentioned to me. She said, "Oh yeah, down there at Otis Park, they got all these cool walls." And I'm going, "You sure they're dry stack?" And she said, "Yeah. No. So here you have Avoca just last year. And what you have is what looks like a dry stack stone wall. But why isn't it? Everything at the top, from the coping stones to the top stones, it's all mortared. It's all mortared. And there's mortaring throughout, and the construction is not the same as a dry stack. It's not meant to hold onto each other, and it has basically parallel sides. So it's not using the physics, it's not using the friction to stay up. So you also will see in the corners this very interesting, what I think is interesting, is all of the gateways, all of the corners have these quadrilated pillars. I just call them the conical things. And that's a very specific note that the CCC and the WPA were at work. This is, someone had this in their style manual, and this is how the walls were built. So if you see that particular construction, your mind should go right to the 1930s. And those men who were out of work, or amazing stone workers who went to work and built these amazing walls. Just because they're dry stack doesn't mean they're not pretty cool walls. They are. And of course, they did a lot. The National Youth Administration did a lot of building there in Avoca. So if you've not been, you should go, because it's a really cool place. And who knows where we are here? I'm going to jump down east of Mitchell, yeah. So you've got Spring Mill State Park and all of those archways and some of the lovely retaining walls. There aren't so many fences that you see at Spring Mill. Some of them are hiding out in the woods. They were built and they're hiding. This one is hiding right out in the woods. That one. It's just hiding out there along one of the trails. And what do you see? This is at the Hamer Cemetery. You see that same configuration. Now look really close, and you'll see this whole line here. That's all mortar. It's all cracked and falling. So that is your key, and mortar is in between the coping stones. So that is your key that it is not a dry stack, but it is certainly the same stone, and it is certainly built for the same reasons. This is Spring Mill on that map I told you about. And oddly enough, right along where you see all this work was done, guess what that dark line is? Harrodsburg stone. Imagine that. Right there, right where they wanted it.
That's beautiful.
So the archway is just gorgeous, and they've just done a whole lot of new stuff down there if you haven't been in a while. Okay, let's jump east of town to Otis Park and the Ragsdale House. The next few pictures are actually from the nomination form done in 2002 to put the park and the house on the National Register. Some beautiful coping stones, but those are redone or new, because there's no way that they're actual coping stones. They're not slanted and they are mortared. Here you see a beautiful, I love that postcard. And you see the archways, the driveway up. And right along up here, if you look really, really closely, and I know it's there because I've read it in the historic description, is what at one time was a full-fledged dry stack stone wall. Whether it is now, I don't know. I haven't been down there to see. I want to make sure everybody knows where it is, right? Everybody knows where the park is. Okay. So this, I want to move from the big map of Shawswick over to, you'd think my mind would remember. Right here is where the park is. You see the name there? Can you read it? Yeah, I remember that. N.L. Hall. And what's this? Leatherwood Creek. Guess what? Runs right through it. The creek runs right through it. So it's important for me in my research to know where things are so that I can put the dots together and kind of map it out. So Otis Park in 1818, Shawswick was the place to be. It was between Salt Creek and White River. It had great farmland, and that's where the population started. In 1865, a man named William Ragsdale built the Italianate mansion. I think he overspent, kind of went bankrupt. And then, remember that guy we just talked about, Nathan Hall? He actually purchased 179 acres. There seems to be a gap in, Ragsdale had more than that. I don't know what happened to the rest of the land, so I haven't spent a lot of time looking yet. But Nathan Hill purchased 197. He got busy with other things. And then in 1899, this guy built the dairy farm, which is Pine Hall. There are a bunch of different pines on the property, so they call it Pine Hall. Okay, whatever. Then a group of Bedford Country Club businesses went together to do the country club, and they did a good job of managing. So Fred Otis, who I may know that name, he purchased it, and he purchased it with the intention to give it to the community. So that's pretty cool all by itself. So 1935, you've got this property, and we have nationally a massive economic downturn, and people needed to go to work. So this is the map that's online. You can begin to see how it breaks down the different layers, and see again, you got Otis Park out over here. And that's just we looked at that tiny little piece. So it's really kind of fun to look online for that. As you're going through going through the nomination, it actually talks about ashlar walls and dry stack stone walls butting up against one another. There's a really good example of that. Now, ashlar just means that it is tightly fitted and very, kind of like, think of pyramids, that everything is so tight, fit perfectly. And the ashlar, they call them random because they just happen to be there in different kinds of stone and unusual places. Well, somewhere the writers of the nomination came up with this concept, which I zeroed right into. It's like one sentence in a 28-page document. And it talks about the stone wall was made of small boulders. No, they weren't boulders, they were flat rocks, gathered from Leatherwood Creek, the creek that runs through the property. The wall built by 2 Irish immigrants is believed to be the first of its kind, built in south central Indiana. Well, holy smokes, that is the first reference I have found anywhere that refers to something earlier than the CCC. So my current projected research question is, can we prove that there were dry stack stone walls there before the CCC came and did their work? I think there must have been, but we'll see. That is yet to be. Here's a couple more pictures. This is just a really nice wall here. And this is one of the gardens, and you can see you'll see a lot of times the stone is used in places after it's been bulldozed down or the wall fell down. It'll be repurposed within the landscape. All right. We've got Eichard, Scoggins, which is downstream from Otis Park, Green Hill, and Starr are the 4 cemeteries where I've actually found walls. So Eichard, the first person buried there is in 1825, and you can see the walls. They have no mortar. Hello, right there, no mortar. And they're in decent shape, so somebody may have fixed them. Here's a couple more from Eichard, different angles. The walls do appear to be original, from what I can tell. The Holman Scoggin, now there's a couple of different Scoggins out there, cemeteries. This is Holman Scoggin, you gotta get the right Scoggin. It's misnamed in the Shard database. So this one is upstream, and I think this one is near Bedford Christian Church Camp, if I remember correctly. And those walls look like you would expect them to look at that age and not having been maintained. Kagas, again, these are unverified, all the cemeteries I've not personally been to. So I'm just kind of looking, and that one is right in the middle of your town. That is at Beech Grove, and you can see we've got, these are ashlar, which are very close limestone fitted. You know, you're not gonna fit a quarter in between there. And there's gonna be a little bit of mortar, possibly. But you've also got on the wings out here to the side, what appear to be dry stack. They may or may not be. I haven't checked that out. So if you personally have interfaced with those walls, let me know. Otherwise, eventually I'll go check them out. But other than that, you've got Star, which is not much of a cemetery. It's a tiny little one. And it's got this little wall along the road. And here you can see it kind of falling apart in another photo that's a little earlier. So that one is way out in the middle of nowhere. And I keep hearing about the one by the waterworks, but I've not been there. So this is an homage to that. I'll get there someday. But my point is here that it was developed in 1909. So it's not going to be an original 1800s dry stack stone wall. It may or may not be dry stack, but we'll figure that out. But that's in there as a marker. So keep me honest so I can figure it out. As I was going through all of this, I had a little happy, maybe it was the Oliver wine, I don't know. But the paternity suit issue came very front and foremost. I mean, who exactly is the father of what limestone around here? And everybody's the father of something. So I had to put all these together, and coming back to Nathan Hall again at the end, he was the one who really said, we can make money doing this. So he's the one that we can thank for everything that came after. So I think he must have been a pretty brilliant guy. And then Winthrop Foote apparently was quite a character. And he was the one that opened the Blue Hole Quarry, which was the first quarries in this area. So you know, up in our part of the woods, we refer to the father of limestone as John Matthews, and that's over in Ellisville. The first one to really make a truly commercial out of the quarries there. And now, my question for you is, I can quickly go through Monroe County. We're right at an hour. Is everybody okay? You want to go through these? If you need to get up and leave, you do that, and you won't hurt my feelings at all. So I really shortened these, but I wanted you to see the difference in what you see in Monroe County from here. Just up the road, you know where the funky little gas station is, just before you join 69? If you didn't know it, off to your right is the Stip Bender Farm. And this was recently put on the National Register, and it is on land first settled by Hugh Campbell. He was one of the early settlers about 1819 and developed a farm in the 1830s. So that whole area is just littered with stone walls, absolutely everywhere. The orange shows you that the actual size of the land. This is what it looked like in aerial photo in the 50s. And there's your little gas station right up there. This whole area has remnant walls everywhere you see those orange lines. They're buried in the woods. And we've actually had Rumpke restore the wall that's right here in order for them to use that property when they bought it. We held their feet to the fire, and we got the Dry Stone Conservancy to come up and fix that wall. So it's been restored. Yay! There are some big wins. The part of that is Church Lane, if you've ever been down that way. This kind of gives you a look at everything underneath all of that yucky honeysuckle vine is dry stack stone wall, and it's in various stages of disrepair going east. Now we pop up north, closer to Ellisville, and that's where the Ben Owens farm is. These are the walls that are taller than me. They are in pristine shape. I thought I'd turn that off. This house has just been purchased by a very fun couple, and I know them well, so I'm going to get easy access to it. I'm very excited about that. I'll be able to go do a lot more research. There's also a mansion that goes with it, and it's had various iterations of names. And what we see, let's see, the interim report from Monroe County suggests these walls were done in 1870, 1875. and nearby. There's more walls in this area that you wouldn't see unless you're looking for them. Right across the road, this stone appears in one of the walls, which gives us a probable date of 1878 by J. Adams, who actually lived in the area. So I think he was probably someone who was very involved in the various walls. We were able to, I did his genealogy and figured out where he was doing. And this is on the Owens farm. You can see we start here and we're going a direct line along that property line again. It goes all the way down to where you can't see it, straight out here, and then a wall goes north all the way up through the cut, and it's buried in the woods, full standing, 7 feet tall.
That size.
It's there.
It's that size all the way around.
Yep, it makes a right angle turn right here over a little creek. And I tell you what, it's pretty cool to be there. So my question was, Ben Owens, he was kind of a funny guy. I think he just wanted people to know who he was. And he took that fence all around his property. And that was done just after the Civil War. And we know that from the dates we have. Matlock Heights, do you know where that is? Do you know where the McDonald's is? In Bloomington North Side? Okay, think McDonald's North Side and then go catty corner toward Griffey Creek. That's Matlock Heights, out that way. When they put up this sign when they were selling, I read some of the city council records. Nobody's going to want to put anything out there. It's too far out of town. Yeah, Well, now those houses are mid-century moderns. So they've come into their own in terms of historic preference. This is the Matlock Farmstead, about in 1947, but the Sullivans owned it before that. And if you look, you'll find all sorts of wall remnants throughout. And you know what's right over here? A big ravine. And you know what's in that ravine? Harrisburg limestone. And throughout the entire neighborhood, you will find rocks that have been reused, repurposed, and used for different, landscaping. So this closer to home, Victor Pike and Dillman Road area. This is actually Cheryl's photograph, so I have to give her a shout out there. That was her area. She was from the Harrisburg area. And the Ketchum Farm property. Stones from the Ketchum Farm walls were used to clad the outside of Beck Chapel on IU's campus. Factoid. Mrs. Beck was a Ketchum. So here you have some near the Clear Creek Bridge on Dillman Road. And the walls are all along there. They're very much in disrepair. This one is on the Clear Creek Trail, and this particular wall goes up a hill, and it's about 7 feet tall on private property. So it's a great shape, but this is, you can see this from the trail. And this is a tiny little wall remnant. See how bitty it is? Where Fullerton Pike is turning into Gordon Pike is turning into Aurora Road. That's just about open, by the way. This is where the trail line goes underneath that new road. It's just off to the south. So I know there had to be more than that at some point. So that's on my research list. And I made sure that, Cheryl helped me, we made sure that they didn't knock it down. It's written into the contracts for the road, because it's very, very close. This is north of town, and you can see these are original here. There's no mortar, they're in great shape. This is over to Ellettsville, Campbell's Park. Those are sort of falling down. They're actually used, there's a whole wall along Hart Strait Road that has these. And of course down on in Ellettsville proper. You'll see the walls there, they're in shape. So Monroe County cemeteries, real quickly by township, I came up with 12 different ones. You can see them in various levels of disrepair. This is on the old Oliver property. That one you can see is really in bad shape. This one is tiny. Yes, indeed, it is right there. It's at the corner of 4 different tracts of land, and there's one nice man that keeps it up. Because it's all his property, and that has a wall around it as well. This one, you recognize where it is? Go to IU, go to the IMU unit on campus. The Dunn Cemetery is very famous. Dunn sisters, Brewster sisters, they're all patriots. And their descendants can still be buried there in the Dunn Cemetery. And that, if you look here, early football game, there's your wall. Right there, see it? Going around the cemetery. That's this wall right here. Maple Grove Cemetery, I talked about, they moved part of it inside the church. Rogers Cemetery, I'm of the opinion that this was rebuilt. It doesn't look original to me at all, but I checked with IU, and of course they don't keep any records of landscaping. Why would they?
At least they saved it.
Sorry?
At least it was saved. At least it was saved, even if it's.
Well, yes, it was saved or it was brought in. Herman Wells, who was president of the university forever and a half, and I wish we had him back, he loved these walls. He loved them. So he made sure that at least the homage was made to bring in the stones and do some things with them. So I thank him for that. Deckard 1 is near Lake Monroe. And as you can see, right there, Getty, what do you see? Yep, and you see the coping stones have been mortared. So this was clearly the CCC went over the county line and worked on this one, and possibly other sides. Ketchum Cemetery is fenced on 3 sides because the other side is a drop to the creek, and nobody's going to come up that way. Perry Township, we've got, the only one in city Bloomington proper is Covenanter, which is the corner of High and Hillside. People often see that one if you're going to the mall. And then tucked into this inaccessible little piece of land on the north side, just off Sample Road exit, is the Turner Ridge Cemetery. And you can see, yes, indeed, there is a stone fence all the way around. I'm not sure about this because I've not physically been there. I need to get permission to get there. So I'm going to quickly just mention who are the craftspeople. There was a ton of workers here that during the Depression were put to work building these walls, and I am so grateful for that. So the clusters here of the known walls were either reused stone or brand new collected stone, but what a treasure to have those. In Bloomington, we know that they're just after the Civil War, and from what I've been able to date, most of the cemeteries probably were between 1880 and 1900. We don't see, I'm still looking for churches that have records that go back. So if you're involved with a church that has a fence and records that go back, then let's take a look at it. There's also a lot of, in the 1970s, folklore was a big thing at IU, and a lot of people went out to interview. And that's where a lot of the anecdotal information we have comes from. And I've dug in through the archives at IU to read tons and tons of information, and theses and books that were written by those folks who did those interviews and research back in the 70s. Maple Grove Church, we know the builder was Frank Sater in 1868 to 1878. He was paid $275. I suspect the congregation probably helped him because there are references to 4 mules and 8 wagons a day coming up from the creek, which would have been Stout Creek. Old Man Ellett, and I assume that's the Ellettsville Ellets, he was paid $100 to build this. And this was the one that's 12 feet high. And just massive, massive walls. And they're out on Mount Tabor Road, which, by the way, was where, out in Steinsville, where the first limestone stuff got started out there. Maple Grove Road, the J. Adams, the one I showed you that has his name on it. And then Mount Gilead is the one that I have the actual contract for, which is 1888. I mentioned I come back to it. The contract calls for 3 walls. There's 2 walls. And so the keeper of the, I was talking to the keeper of the data, and I asked him, I said, what happened to the 3rd wall? And he just started laughing. I said, what happened to the 3rd wall? He said, well, you know what's right behind there. I said, yeah, the railroad. He said, well, we had the right of way. We had to clear the right of way, and then we got some more stuff. He said, they needed more room, so they just dug a trench, plowed it in, covered it over, and put a road on top. But that's what you did. Small congregation, is never very a big one, but bless their hearts, they have a pretty side to look at. Mount Gilead, that's what I just basically told you. And I finally tracked down who built all of the walls at Ben Owens, and it was a guy named George Wiley. And I've been able to track him through some historic records. And I don't know what he was paid, but he lived there for 10 years. And it took him at least that long to build those walls. This is a list of sources that I desperately want to find. If you know any paper hoarders, these have disappeared from the History Museum in Bloomington, and those are things that I've actually talked to 3 of these authors. I tracked them down. It took me months. Judith Munns was my favorite one. I tracked her down in Alaska, and she didn't know any of this was going on, the research, so I've been sending her documentation. Really nice lady. For the future, let us know where you see walls. Let's check them out. Let's get them on the inventory. And let's find out any references that we can. Any information, if you know churches or schools or any history, look through them before you let people get rid of all the information. And visualize on a map where things might be. Look for Harrodsburg limestone. And remember, limestone's not just for skinny dipping.
It's a great picture.
I stole that from 20th Century Fox. Well, I didn't take it myself. Okay, questions? Thank you for sitting through all that. There is a kiosk back here that has some of the Monroe County walls and have some of that landscape information I was talking about. So if you're interested.
I do have a question. Have you seen these in any other counties?
The dry stack stone walls in Indiana. I have seen some references to stone walls that look similar down in Switzerland County. And there's a guy that does videos on YouTube. And I'm reaching out to him to ask him where he's seen them, and then I'll do a couple road trips. So I don't know if they are or not, but I want to check them out because he knows that they're important, so he's mentioned them.
Susan, I spent some time around Asbury College outside of Lexington, Kentucky, and they called their stone walls slave walls.
Well, unfortunately, that is something that a lot of people have said they call them. And into the late 19th century, the question is slave walls. I don't like the term. I find it offensive. I will say that the book that's going around covers that very, very carefully, and it talks about the importance of enslaved individuals who may or may not have worked on a property and helped. But what we do know, and that book tells us by name, we know which black individuals who were formerly enslaved went on to be slave stonemasons. And some of them came to Indiana. So I'd rather look at it that way, but I appreciate the question. Yeah?
Smithsonian Magazine has an article in July-August issue called Classic Rock, and it's about the dry stone wall.
Where are they?
They mentioned Scotland, but they also mentioned even California, and they mentioned Kentucky.
No, the Kentucky walls. I'll have to look that up, the Smithsonian. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yeah, the ones in that, what we do know is that by far that the walls that are dry stack were built by Scotch and Irish who came directly here. They may have been here well, before it was a country, and they worked in Virginia and eastern Kentucky, and then we know the walls, the fellows who built in northern Monroe County, it was 2 Irish lads that owned the property, but I don't know the ethnicity yet of the builder. I know George Wiley built them. So sometimes it's who financed them, but we find that for the most part in Kentucky, we see an Irish-Scotch heritage of the people that started those walls. And then we would have passed that on and taught other people how to do it. And enslaved people would have picked up on that. And we do have some that actually came, I've seen them on the census, names that were in the book that came to Indiana. So I think they must have had some impact here.
what was the primary building period for the rock stone walls in the beginning and ending?
Well, that's tough. We know that in New England, it started when the Pilgrims got here, because they were on their way. So in New England, the rock walls are just ubiquitous. They're everywhere, and they still do it. I have a friend who has a farm who said, last week I had to pull out 10 of those things. So that's ongoing. What we find is that in the late 1700s, we see a lot in Virginia, and that's when a lot, Kentucky was still a part of Virginia at that part, so depending on where your boundary is, that's when a lot was being done when the trespass laws were passed, because they wanted to keep the breeds separate. So that's when we kind of can do that, and that's in the late 1700s to pre-Civil War. And then it declines. There's in the book, they found an estate where every penny spent on the estate for the walls is recorded. It is fabulous. But what we find is that breaks down after the Civil War. I have a working theory. I think that a lot of Hoosiers, a lot of folks from this area, they served in Kentucky and Georgia, or either walked home or rode home or trained home and saw the walls. The cemetery walls, I think, are all dated after that. And in my image, in my dream, I'm seeing these men who go, that's pretty darn cool. We got that stuff in our backyard. Let's put it around the cemetery. Because they're all dated after that. They weren't doing it before. And there's no law that was passed that said you got to put up 4 walls around the cemetery. So I'm wondering, that's on my research list of, can I find anything anywhere that tells me that? I don't know. I won't give up. I'll keep looking. So it's, people now are building new ones with old stone. So it doesn't stop. Good question.
At Boca, you mentioned the Hamer brothers.
Yes.
Is that the same as the Hamer family?
Yes, it is. It's the same folks who built the mall.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And they settled in Avoca and actually put in, that was a stagecoach stop and a grocery store. You've got a monograph right here. The museum did it. And what year was that? It was an ode to Marshall Township, but it's in the museum archives. That's where I got it. What else? Yeah.
In Washington County, Beck's Mill, have you been to that restored mill? The stone wall is very interesting. I don't know if it's dry stacked.
It could be, and it may be Harrodsburg because the line goes down that far.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll put that on my list. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, the Hamer brothers were also at Cave River Valley, what's now Cave River Valley State Natural Area, right over in Washington County, managed by Spring Mill. There's a tiny remnant of a dry stack stone wall.
Okay, Jill is telling us that there's a remnant over in.
Teeny tiny remnant.
When I see those, then I begin
Another
to.
neighbor connection.
I'm learning to go back to see who owned the land when. Because it's not just owning the land. You had to have the resources to allocate to building the walls. And that's a whole different story. No question? No, if it's an auction, you would have just bought a farm. Yeah. Anybody else? Well, if you've got a question you want to ask that you don't want to put your hand up, come up to ask me. Sally's in the back somewhere. I lost her. Yeah, we've got rocks back there. Don't hit anybody with them because they're really. You can go see how heavy they are, and you can see the Chex Mix in person. So I encourage you to do that, and then come ask questions if you've got them, and write me a note if you've got a remnant wall. Okay, and thank you for letting me come. And take care of your walls.